So grateful to be on this course with you, to discovering the secret of your shadow, our shadow, doing the heart warrior work. And so here we are, chapter 5, reclaiming your power. And here's what Debbie has to say about reclaiming your power. If I could make a difference in just one human issue, it would be to relieve everyone of the unbearable suffering of being a victim. The problem with this desire, of course, is that I don't have the power to relieve anyone of anything, including being a victim. Only you can relieve yourself. Everyone I've ever met has some story about how they have been victimized. Most of us blame our shortcomings on our parents, while others blame our teachers, our ex-husbands or wives, our perpetrators, our religious leaders, our friends or grandparents. Many of us feel we've been abused in our job, taken advantage of by our families, abandoned by God, or victimized by life in general. The story of victimization tells us that somewhere along the road we have been wronged, and that the crimes perpetrated against us are the cause of our pain. This is a story that will limit us and strip us of our personal power for as long as we believe it. Most of us have gathered very strong evidence to validate our perception that we are victims of life. And this is certainly one way for us to look at life. If we view our lives from the perspective that we are not the co-creators of our realities, we have been wronged. But if we change our perspective, we find a bigger, more powerful reality that tells us we are the co-creators of our own experience. Viewing our lives from this new perspective, we can embrace everything that has happened to us as exactly what we needed in order to blossom into our full potential and move forward in our lives. Victim consciousness is frightening because when we are in it, we don't always know we're there. Victim consciousness is such an integral part of our stories that we can't even see how deeply it affects our lives. Even if we don't feel like victims in the outer world, many of us have become victims of our own self-abuse. Instead of projecting our blame onto others, we turn it around and project it onto ourselves. Some of us think it makes us better people if we beat ourselves up rather than lay blame on those around us. If we prefer to blame ourselves, we probably have feelings of righteousness about those who we prefer to blame others. But either way, we are the victims. Either we are the victims of someone else, or we are the victims of ourselves. Either way, we are left powerless, and when we feel that we are driven deeper into our stories, what a choice. Either someone else is beating us up, or we are beating ourselves up. Either way, we're left wounded. Either way, we lose. So this is the cost of blame. As long as we're getting something out of our stories, we can never step outside of them. Without even realizing it, most of us get a huge payoff from making others wrong. There is an inner satisfaction that comes from pointing our fingers and assigning blame. Many of us will go to our graves blaming others for the conditions of our lives. We will do anything to avoid taking responsibility for our part in our dramas. But making others wrong and holding on to the pain of our past means committing ourselves to a lifetime of limitation and misery. And as long as we are blaming others for our circumstances, we have no freedom, because our resentment keeps us bound to the very people and the very circumstances we dislike. As long as we carry that seed of resentment in our hearts, we will have to create some kind of pain, drama, or discontent in our lives in order to keep our blame alive. Most of us have a strong internal commitment to saying, "Look what you did to me." No matter how much we scramble in the outer world to make our lives great, this internal commitment to making others wrong will ultimately prevail. It will drive our behavior and draw forth the experiences to prove ourselves right. This is really important to get this. We have to prove that we are right, that we have been wrong, and that somehow that wrong has damaged our ability to manifest the results we desire. As long as we are committed to being the victims of someone else, we will have to find some way to sabotage ourselves in order to justify our resentment. The only way out of this trap is to take responsibility. At the deepest level, many of us avoid taking total and complete responsibility for the event of our lives. We do this because in taking responsibility, we often feel like we are letting someone off the hook who has harmed us. But in truth, taking responsibility is the only way we can let ourselves off the hook. If a person victimizes us and we wind up becoming the greatest human being who ever lived, we will naturally give up making that person wrong and will no longer need or desire to rub the crime in that person's face. In fact, we will see how the skills we've developed and the pain we've endured have been a necessary part of our process. So Debbie met Jerry, an attractive woman in her mid-50s, at a friend's house. And as they talked, Debbie learned that Jerry was a highly successful financial consultant. When Debbie asked her what person or event had contributed most to her success, Jerry looked her straight in the eye and said, "My alcoholic mother." Intrigued by her answer, Debbie questioned her further. "What did your alcoholic mother teach you about financial management?" Debbie asked Jerry, and Jerry went on to tell her that after her father left the family when she was a teenager, her mother became very irresponsible with money, frequently spending all the family's money income on a few wild nights on the town. In order to make sure that she and her two younger brothers had school supplies, clothes to wear, and food to eat, Jerry intercepted her mother's bi-monthly disability checks and used the money to buy necessities for the family. "It sounds like you've got a knack for financial planning your whole life," Debbie said to Jerry. "Not at all," she replied. "When I was younger, all I wanted to do was find a man to support me so I could stay home and raise a family. I wanted nothing to do with managing our finances. Then, when my ex-husband and I divorced, I was forced to make a living on my own. Faced with all the challenges of starting a new career so late in my life, I looked to see what skills or abilities I had that would be valuable to others. It was then that I realized I had a knack for managing money, and that it was because of my financial unstable childhood that I had acquired those skills. I decided to go back to school to get my CPA certification, and suddenly I realized that my mother had actually taught me a lot. Something shifted inside me when I had that realization. I was able to let go of the anger I had carried toward her and no longer blamed her for being financially irresponsible. When I finally let go of blaming my mother, I could see very clearly the direction of my life that my direction of my life was supposed to take. From that point on, it was clear that I no longer needed to suffer around my finances and could contribute my gifts to others while reaping the benefits of my success. Forgiving your parents. Taking responsibility is a process that often comes in layers. I have known people who have come to the difficult realization that even after 12 years of therapy and countless transformational seminars, they were still blaming their parents for their lot in life. Not wanting to feel as though they had wasted all that time and money, they adopted a spiritual approach that told them that they had to take responsibility for their reality. Instead of exploring their deep-seated resentment towards their parents, they tried to make their stories better by saying things like, "My parents did the best they could with the awareness they had." They were carrying their own heavy load. It's not fair to blame them. Though these statements might be true, it's important for people in this situation to really take time to heal the issues from their past by finding the blessings in these events and not just making up new stories about them. Taking responsibility in the spiritual world has become a new form of self-abuse. It leaves us locked into the victimization of our stories. It's another thing we use to beat ourselves up, to make ourselves wrong, and disempower ourselves. This is just another subtler form of this victimization. It turns outward fury into inward seething. Taking true responsibility is a process, and it is the only way out of the victim story. It means acknowledging that we are co-creators of the dramas we have lived. Taking responsibility requires us to extract wisdom from our life experiences and find the gifts that they hold for us, as Jerry did. It means learning the sometimes painful lessons that each experience had to teach us. Responsibility is our ultimate destination. But if we are harboring deep-seated resentment towards others, we must search them out and deal with them. Otherwise, they will continue to poison our psyche, sabotage our self-worth, and suck the life out of our dreams. There are many layers of healing when it comes to our parents. We can feel free at one time, and then something happens and we uncover another level of pain. But if we are not thriving in our lives, it means we are still carrying a little bit of "look what you did to me" regarding our parents. Resentment is very deep. It can take a lifetime to peel off. But if we don't acknowledge that we have it, will never make the progress we desire. If we are continually blocked or stuck and can't find satisfaction in our lives, it means we are still carrying resentment. We might want to consider that in actuality we are withholding ourselves from greatness so we can justify our blame. Once we have completely forgiven our parents for their flaws and shortcomings, the best gift we can give them is to lead extraordinary lives, to shine as brightly as possible. But if we still have some resentment toward our parents or caregivers, we will unconsciously get back at them by being miserable. Ever since she was a young girl, Lori had a dream of becoming an actress. Her teachers recognized her gift for self-expression and drama and encouraged her to pursue a career on stage. Lori's mother, however, was less than supportive. A proud and proper woman, Lori's mother had wanted her to go to a good college and find a respectable and responsible career as her older brothers had done. After some thought, Lori ignored what she considered to be her mother's rigid opinions and chose not to go to college. But she always resented her mother deeply for not encouraging her to follow her passion. A year later, when Lori was 19, she became pregnant out of wedlock. It was 1965. She was living in a conservative Midwest town, and Lori thought the best thing she could do was get married. Because of her proper upbringing, it was important to Lori to feel like a dignified woman having a baby rather than feeling the shame of being a single mother raising a child alone. So Lori chose to marry someone she didn't love, knowing that in all likelihood she would end up raising her child by herself. And it turned out that Lori was right. Just months after her son Joshua was born, Lori's husband moved out. Then, when Joshua was 6 months old, Lori's mother sent her a newspaper clipping announcing an open casting call for a new play that was coming to town. The play called for a leading lady in her early 20s, and her mother suggested that she should try out for the role. Lori was startled by her mother's sudden encouragement of her acting career and began resenting all the times her mother had discouraged her from chasing her dream and put her down for having the desire to act. "Screw you," Lori screamed as she tore up the newspaper clipping. In that moment, Lori made her mother wrong, decided never to act again, and sealed her fate. Blame and resentment are the toxic emotions that keep us stuck inside the smallness of our stories. Woven throughout our personal dramas is an underlying conversation that might sound like this. "Look what you did to me. You screwed up my life. I am nothing like you. I am nothing just like you. Or I'm never going to amount to anything, just like you told me." We hold others responsible for our deficiencies and then set out to prove that we have in fact been ill-treated and wronged. Our poor me story becomes our evidence, proving that we've been mistreated, neglected, or abused, and every time we fall short of doing our best, we have the perfect alibi. We get to say, "If I hadn't had that angry father, lousy girlfriend, alcoholic mother, been raped, molested, beaten, ignored, abandoned, called names, I wouldn't be like this." Then we use every failure, every disappointment, every broken relationship, or botched business deal to support our conviction that we have been victimized. We continually sabotage our efforts towards success and happiness in order to hold on to our resentment and keep our stories intact. Our continued failures or misery prove to us that we are right and those we blame are wrong. It's important to start to identify the people in our lives we get to make wrong by not living the life of our dreams. Maybe it's our mom or dad or stepfather, the nuns and priests who raised us, our rabbi, our guru, our doctor, the kindergarten teacher who didn't pick us. Maybe we get to make our sister wrong. If she hadn't done to us what she did when we were 6, we wouldn't be such a mess. Maybe it's the bullies who made fun of us or the kids in our class who left us out. The people we blame offer a perfect excuse for our self-sabotage. We are unconsciously punishing them by not being as successful or as happy as we could be. We say either verbally or non-verbally, "Look, I really am a failure. You really did hurt me." I met Sunny, an aspiring writer, at a recent seminar. As we talked, Sunny told me that from the moment she was born, she felt that nothing she did was ever good enough for her dad. This was the theme of her story. The third of 3 daughters, Sunny was raised in a rural ranching town and was taught by her dad to work the farm as a cattle hand. Sunny was a sensitive little girl who was naturally nurturing and caring, but she didn't have the heart or the knack for ranching. Sunny told Debbie how she used to run off the farm in tears after being asked to push a pill down a cow's throat, or saw the horns off of the baby calf. She was always left with the feeling of being worthless in her father's eyes. She wasn't the little boy she felt her father wanted her to be. Debbie soon learned that for years, Sonny had been yearning to write a book about the lessons women teach each other. When Debbie asked her what was holding her back from beginning her project, she said, "I feel in my heart that my book will be a national bestseller, and that when my dad sees me on the talk shows and opens the paper to find my name in print, he will go to church on Sunday morning and tell people, 'Look what my little girl did.' I never want to be successful, so that he gets to claim part of my glory for his own." Sunny had wasted years of her life holding back from fulfilling her heart's desire just so she could deprive her dad of the pleasure of bragging about her. By the end of the weekend, Sunny could see how much of her power she had given away to her father. She could also see that it had not been her father's disapproval. If it wasn't for his disapproval, she never would have felt drawn to writing. Debbie is certain that on the day Sunny fulfills her dream of becoming an author, she will thank God that her father was emotionally unavailable, because this lack of intimacy with him is what gave Sunny her dream. She will thank God that for every little thing that happened to her, including the fact that he, with all his flaws, was her father, Sunny had a choice. She can choose to carry that grudge for the rest of her life, thereby depriving her dad of the right to be proud of her. But if she deprives him of her success, she also deprives herself. And she deprives the world of hearing what she has to say. Most of us have been carrying around the same grudges our entire lives. And if we want, we can carry them around until we're 82. It might feel good to blame our mothers or our fathers, our sisters or our brothers. Pointing our fingers at others feels good sometimes. It's a way of taking the pressure off of ourselves. "You did it to me" feels a lot better than "I did it to me." But the questions to ask ourselves now are, how many years have I been making my mother or my father wrong? How many times have I repeated the same unhealthy behaviors in an attempt to make them pay? How many more years do I want to do this? What have I sacrificed by holding on to my grudges? If we're not creating everything we want in our lives, we are probably holding on to resentment towards someone or something. If we're not fulfilling all of our desires, we are sabotaging ourselves somewhere. We are still more committed to not having it all than to being happy. If we start fulfilling every desire we have, there will be nobody to make wrong, and without that tie to our past, we will be free to live the life of our dreams. When we have let go of our right to be a victim, we'll understand that we had the perfect parents who taught us the perfect lessons. We will no longer resent them, no matter how much they misled or mistreated us. Released from the smallness that being a victim ensures, we will stand tall in all our power and all our glory, and we will be grateful for every single incident, both our dark and our light. What's your excuse? Whether we are making others wrong, we are using them as our excuse not to live our lives to the fullest. As humans, we are masters at inventing excuses to justify the conditions of our lives. Like a leopard blends into the surrounding jungle, our excuses camouflage them as truth. They hide out and whisper quietly in our ears every time we try to go beyond the boundaries of our story. The scary part is that most of us hold our justifications as truths rather than as excuses. In order for us to break free from our stories, we must be willing to expose the excuses we use to hold our stories together. With a discerning eye, we need to look at our daily dramas, go through our list of reasons and alibis, and ask, is this the truth, or is it just an excuse? In order to begin the life-changing process of dismantling our current reality, we must expose the excuses we use to hold ourselves back and to stop ourselves from manifesting all that we want in life. Our excuses act like invisible containers surrounding us, setting the boundaries of where we can go and what we can achieve. This is the capsule theory. Our excuses justify the condition of our lives while making us believe we are powerless to reach the unreachable and attain the unattainable. Imagine being surrounded by a clear glass container. Every time we wish to go beyond this invisible boundary, we bump up against the glass and slide back to the place we began. This is what happens when we believe our excuses. Unknowingly, we continue to wind up back where we began because our limitations have been set. They have been programmed deep into our minds, and like any good operating system, they are just following instructions. Excuses keep us stuck in our current realities and perpetuate the continuous cycle of our discontent. And our excuses can take many forms. Like this: it's never going to happen for me. I can't have it all. I'm not good enough, old enough, smart enough. Or how about I'm too old, too stupid, too fat, too tired, to fill in the blank with whatever yours is. Does I'm blocked, I'm stuck, I'm confused, I can't help it, or I don't know how ring a bell? How about I'm too lazy, I don't have enough energy, I'm a procrastinator, or it will happen in God's time, not mine. Maybe your excuse is I need more education, more information, or more help. Does I'm not ready, I'll do it tomorrow, I'll never be ready sound familiar? How about if only I had a different childhood, if only I had a good role model? It's his fault or her fault. If he would just change, if she would just change, if I don't have what it takes. Someone else could definitely do it better. Is powerlessness familiar? What about I need help? Or if I speak my mind, people won't like me. Or if I fulfill my highest potential, I'll be all alone. Haven't I done enough already? Or how do your excuses sound? Our personal dramas, our pain, our complaints, and our discontent often become our excuse for not manifesting our most magnificent selves. Our dramas take up so much space in our lives that most of us wouldn't know ourselves without them. In order to disengage from our dramas and step beyond our limited perspectives, we need to see what we get out of holding on to them. A quick process you can use to see if you are making an excuse is to ask yourself the following questions. Is this the truth, or is this an excuse that I've heard before? That's the first question. Is this the truth, or is this an excuse that I have heard before? The second question, just think of a person that you admire, someone that you respect and look up to. And once you have that person, this is the question. Would this person see this as the truth or as an excuse? So you look at it from their perspective. 3, am I responsible for this choice, or am I making others, God, or life responsible? Asking yourself this series of questions should help you to determine if you are justifying the conditioning of your life by making excuses. Let me give you an example. One of my favorite excuses used to be that I was too busy to have fun and take time off. I would hear myself constantly complaining as I told my dramatic story about how much work I had to do. Then one day my girlfriend, Danielle, cornered me and asked, Debbie, who is in charge of making your schedule? Although I knew that I was the one who was in charge of my schedule, I had 1,000 excuses for why I had to stay so busy. It's my publisher's fault. It's my sister's fault. It's my publicist's fault. It's my staff's fault. They need me. All of these excuses left me feeling powerless and like a huge victim. Unquestioningly, I accepted these excuses as the truth. Then I stopped and asked myself, is this the truth? Or is this an excuse I've heard before? My answer was clearly, I have heard this too many times before. Then I thought about my friend Cheryl and asked myself, would she see this as the truth or an excuse? I knew immediately that Cheryl would support me in seeing that no one in the world could make my well-being a priority but me, that I was using other people as an excuse not to take responsibility for my time. Next, I asked myself, am I making others, God, or life responsible for my circumstances? Her answer, absolutely. It was then that she realized that all her reasons were just some form of an excuse that left her feeling like a powerless victim of her own life. She realized that if she wanted to have more fun and leisure in her life, all she needed to do was stop making excuses and take responsibility for her choices. And so she did. Recently, well, this is after that, while giving a lecture on excuses for participants in one of her coaching programs, she had yet another opportunity to examine where she might be using excuses in her life. She felt sure that she had blasted through most of what had held her back and kept her repeating familiar patterns, but she looked anyway. A week into her inquiry, she began to feel a cold coming on. Her cold symptoms always seemed to be the same, a scratchy throat and a tired body. She knew those feelings all too well. It seemed she was always catching some kind of cold that would stop her in her tracks and land her in bed for a few days. Sometimes she would stop to try it from coming on by filling her body with every known supplement, and at other times she would just surrender to it and allow herself to be sick and stay at home. This particular week was an exceptionally busy one, and she felt she couldn't afford to be sick. And in the middle of her usual regimen of taking vitamins and astragalus and vitamin C, she had a startling realization. Getting a cold was her excuse. She was blown away. Suddenly, the lights went on, and she could see clearly that every time she needed rest, every time she had too much on her plate or too many commitments to keep up, she would get a cold. This was her excuse, her reason, her alibi, her way of letting everyone know she was out of commission and couldn't take on anymore. Most of all, though, catching a cold served as a billboard that said, "Don't expect anything more of me." Looking back at her childhood, she could see that she had a pattern of getting sick, and that was how she received extra attention from her parents. She went to bed that evening in awe of her realization. But still feeling like she was coming down with something, she lay in bed and she made a list of all the things she could do to take care of herself instead of getting sick. Closing her eyes and taking a few minutes to go inside, she was easily able to access the answers. What she needed to do was make sure she had plenty of time for herself every week. Her inner wisdom told her very specifically that she needed to schedule at least 1 hour daily for nothing but prayer and meditation. In addition, she needed to schedule 1 day a month, a Debbie day, for doing things that nurtured her well-being. What she had noticed is that when she was not using her excuses and running herself ragged, but instead following her inner guidance, she stayed relatively healthy and strong. Many times she then learned, when she felt like she was coming down with something, realizing that getting sick is just an excuse for giving herself attention, she chose to take the time to give herself the attention she needed, even if that meant canceling plans and disappointing people. Giving up our excuses propels us into the powerful consciousness of taking responsibility for our lives. When we take responsibility, we step into the full power of our humanity. We leave behind the limits set by our stories and push behind our shadow beliefs, those beliefs that tells us you can't. We step into the potent knowledge that we can co-create our desires and our dreams. Taking responsibility for everything we are is the greatest gift we can give ourselves because it makes us whole. Let me say that again. Taking responsibility for everything we are is the greatest gift we can give ourselves because it makes us whole. It empowers us and supports us as we move toward our full potential. So close your eyes and breathe into this thought. Do you feel you have the innate power to change the direction of your life? Do you feel strong or do you feel weak? There is nothing more exciting for us than to know that we have the power to change. Just breathing into that, we get to choose how we want to view the world. Either we are inspired by the possibility of being the co-creators of every event in our lives, or we remain victimized by our shadow beliefs, which drain our power, telling us that we don't deserve to have it all. Even if you have been living inside the story that life has done it to you, when you can say, "I am doing it to me," you'll have the power to stop it or do it differently. The voice of power says, "I am doing it. I created it. I'm responsible for it. I can change it." The voice of powerlessness says, "I can't help it. They did it to me. I can't get out of it." At each and every moment in your life, you have the opportunity to choose which world you live in. This is your opportunity to define your world. Powerful, powerless. You choose. This is the gift of being on this course, discovering the secret of your shadow and owning your shadow story, to go from powerless to powerful. Thank you for being on this course with me.